Hello, and welcome to another rating grind video recap, tournament recap thing, words English speaking. Yes. Today is February 16th, 2025. I've come back from it. This is the second time I'm recording this because the first time I forgot to change the audio settings on OBS, so nothing actually got recorded in terms of sound. And yeah, so I didn't realize until I finished, so that was great. Yeah, today was interesting. It's the classic case of I could have done better, but you know, such is life, right? Let's just get straight into the games because there's not really much to talk about before this, really. So round number one, I'm playing Black Pieces against Brendan Seto. Now, if you watched the last recap video, you'll recognize the name. That's because I played against him in round two of last month's tournament. And in that game, which let me flip to over here, he played the tall variation against me in the Carl Khan. I did lose this game, but it was mainly because I played really scared and passively, and I basically let him play the game as much as he wanted to while I was just like turtled up. So that's what happened last game. This game, I have the Black Pieces again, so I'm expecting him to play the tall again. Before the game, after I got the pairing, I was like, when I realized I was playing against him, I'm like laughing to myself and kind of like, here we go. Oh boy, this kid is tall. All right, let's go. Let me look at my notes real quick as I'm like trying to get to my seat and, like waiting for everyone else to get in their seats. I'm like looking at my notes. I'm looking at the previous game. I'm like furiously trying to find the Lee chess study that I put on this game. I was like, where is it? I'm like, okay, yeah. Okay, that's what he did. Yep. Okay, cool. So I was ready to play a tall variation against him, and to my surprise, he played knight f3 instead of d4. I don't know if this was... I don't know. Usually, or the way I understand it, is that people generally only learn like one opening, and they kind of just like keep playing it regardless. So I was surprised to see him play something different. I was totally expecting to go back into the tall, but yeah, we get knight f3. So I'm like, all right, I'm playing d5. He takes. I take back, and I'm gonna skip forward a couple of moves here because this is all just normal Carl Khan development. I will say after knight c3, I did play a6 to stop knight b5. In the Jobava London, after knight c3, if black plays knight c6, it's a big blunder because white can play knight b5 and you can't stop the fork anymore. Nope. You can't stop the fork anymore. But because I played knight c6 before he played knight c3, I have time to play a6 and stop knight b5. So yeah, it's kind of interesting how I like knew this from a different opening. Like it's a different opening, but the same idea can apply here. So a6 stops knight b5 to stop the fork on c7. Bishop d3, bishop g4. He goes back, which I thought was kind of weird. Like if you're gonna put your bishop on d3, like just put it on d3. I guess he was scared of losing the pawn here. So like right now the pawn is hanging. So maybe he just like didn't realize that was the problem. So bishop e2, e6, h3, trying to kick my bishop away. I trade it off for his knight, which is a pretty common trade in the Carl Khan. It's not forced by any means, but it weakens the defense of the d4 pawn, which I am trying to attack. So that's the reason you're okay with trading bishop for knight. But I just want to finish developing first. There's nothing else in the position that is needed. There's nothing else in the position that needs to be done first per se. There's nothing urgent in my position that needs to be addressed. So castle. And I use that phrasing because I just finished annotating a friend's game where he had black pawns on d6 and c7, and white had a pawn on d5, and he was like so focused on developing first, but I was like, no, you got to get rid of that d5 pawn like now, and he just never did. But anyway, queen d3, which I thought was a weird move at first. Like, I didn't know the point of queen d3. I was like looking at like random kingside stuff, like maybe you go bishop e2 or something, and then like here this. I mean, and I'm like, does this even do anything? I don't know. Like, I have time to stop it, so I wasn't really scared. So after I played b5, which, again, is a pretty common. So this idea is pretty common in the Carl Khan, after in like an exchange kind of situation where, let's just say this here or there. Now we have a Carlsbad structure where the pawns kind of meet on d4 and 5, and they slant down to they slant diagonally, but then black has like a minority attack going with these two pawns on the A and B files. In the Queen's Gambit declined exchange, I think it is, you can also get the structure, but with a white. But the idea is like you want to push these pawns and create pawn weaknesses and then attack those weaknesses and try to win the game from there. But instead of knight e2, of course, he played a3, trying to stop b4. So I was like, fair. I played queen b6, just like getting my pieces ready to somehow try to break through on the queen side with the minority attack. Rook fd1, protecting the d4 pawn. That's another idea of queen b6, to attack the d4 pawn. Rook a c8, just, work on the open file. Can't be bad. And then bishop e2. So I was like, what's the point of bishop e2? I thought for a decent amount of time, because I was really trying to figure out, like, that doesn't seem to do anything. But then I realized, oh, what you're trying to accomplish is a4, right? And if I take, you take, and then it's like kind of rough because I might lose this pawn as well, or I probably will lose this pawn as well. Or I will lose a pawn, I should say. I will lose the h pawn, or the a pawn for it. If I push, same idea. Right, I can't take the knight because my queen's hanging. So let's just say queen takes, bishop takes. Now you have to resolve the knight here, so maybe like or wait. No, sorry, wrong order. Something like, let's just say knight b8 or knight b1. Now I can't really defend this pawn without making some kind of concession like rook a8 and just like moving my bishop or my rook back to the a file, which is a little lame. Yeah, so didn't like it. I played knight a5, and the idea behind knight a5 was to kind of interpose after a4. So like after a4, I would try to interpose and stop this attack here. He did play a4, so I was right with figuring out what his idea was. I played knight c4 in response, and against b3, I was kind of ready to play b4 to counterattack, and then take. I don't really know what happens after that, but yeah, basically I'm just getting in the way of this so that it's going to be an even trade. A b5. I start with knight b2. That was the other idea, which I forgot to mention. There's a fork here. So there is a fork there. So I'm winning an exchange. Queen d2, take the rook. He takes back with the knight, which makes sense because he wants to keep this rook on the a file. And if he takes with the rook to take it on d1, then he kind of loses control of the a file. Duh. So ab, and he finds a nice move, rook a5, and the rook a5 hits the b pawn. I can't take it because it's protected by the queen. My initial thought in this position was I want to play b4 to disconnect everything. But then I also saw I can play knight e5 to improve my position before I actually do something about this pawn. And then I realized I could also try to get my knight to c3, and b4 helps with that plan. So I could play knight e5, queen e1, c4, and then put my knight there, and it's a pretty decently placed knight. And that's kind of what happened. Knight e4, queen e1, b4. He plays rook a6 instead, defended by the bishop, which, again, nice move by him. I play queen b7. He brings his knight back to e3, trying to actually, activate the knight, of course. And now knight c3. So I'm like, okay, my position's pretty good. I got a nice knight on c3. I'm up in exchange. Life should be good. Like, everything should be fine. Bishop b3. Rook a8. I'm trying to force the trade of rooks here. And it is forced because you can't go anywhere on any of these squares. Queen a1. I take the rook, and he takes back with the bishop. And I was looking at this position, and I'm like, there's something funny I can do here. And it's rook a8. Now, it doesn't actually give me an advantage, but I wanted it to be funny because what I saw in my head was take here, and then, my rook is active on the back rank, and I was probably going to play something like rook c1 or maybe rook a2 to attack this pawn, and I was going to figure it out from there. But after rook a8, he played queen takes c3, and I was like, oh, that's a good move, because even though the queen's hanging, it's like a desperado kind of thing, and if I take here, he takes there, and now it's 2 pieces for a rook, and it's even. It's a little difficult. It's hard to defend this pawn. Hard to defend the pawn sufficiently, but yeah. I ended up taking his bishop back, so now it's an even trade. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm still up the exchange, and we're equal on pawns. No, I'm up a pawn, so I was like, okay, I should be able to handle this position. He plays queen c7, attacking my bishop. I played queen a7, trying to trade the queens. Of course, he's going to decline it, so he plays queen c6. And then here, I went crazy and played g5. Here, I kind of just had tunnel vision, because I totally thought he was just going to play bishop g3, and I would just go from here and play something like maybe h5, h4 or something. But he played bishop e5. And I'm like, oh, that's pretty bad for me. I can't play f6 because then I lose the pawn with check. So I have to play something else. I played queen a6 again, desperately trying to trade the queens because his queen is like such an annoying piece in my position right now. And of course, he's not going to trade the queens. So he plays queen d7. I play queen f8, trying to trade off the bishops here. Bishop f6, attacking my g-pawn. Again, queen a7, just trying to attack the queen and get it out of here, but he's going to be very stubborn about it. I play h6 to defend my pawn. Knight g4 attacks my pawn, kind of. Not really, but kind of. I play bishop g7, just trying to trade this off. He takes, I take. He plays king h2. Kind of a interesting move. I think he was just like waiting for something. I wasn't really sure what, but I was like, okay, that's fine, I guess. I play queen b8, a nice little distant check. And I really wanted to get my rook out of this area, but I just couldn't see how. He played g3, and I really should have just tried moving my rook, but my idea in this position, as I'm getting low on time here, is queen c8, and I mean, he's not going to trade, right? He's going to play something like queen d6. I wanted to take here and then take here and then play rook a1, and then it'd be mate. Obviously, the knight defends it, so I would probably have to fit in h5 at some point. So that was the plan, and I think he played queen d6 after this. After my queen c8, I did stop annotating at this point because I was under like 4-3. I think I was under 3 minutes. The rule is you can stop annotating after either player goes under 5 minutes, but I like to write as much of the game as I can before it's a true time scramble. So that's why, yeah, so the game annotation stops here. We're still playing, of course. But what happened here is, I think I played f6 here, if I'm not mistaken. And then it went something along the lines of like check, like here, check, and just, or maybe like this way or something. it got real bad real fast, and I basically lost all of these pawns. I lost all of these pawns, and my king ended up on b5. And we got to some position where the queen was on d6 again. His knight was on d7. These pieces were still here. My king was on b5. Right, so my king's on b5. His queen's here. His knight landed here. And in this position, I was trying to figure out my next move, but I mentally froze. Like I just like stared at it, and I was like trying to figure out a move, but my brain wouldn't like process anything. It's kind of like stage fright, where you're just like deer in headlights, just like, and like before I knew it, I just flagged. Like, I just didn't make a move for 20 seconds, and then I just flagged, and I was like, and when I looked at my clock again, I was like, wow, I can't believe I flagged myself, and I was like, not that hard. I was just like, wow, and he looked at me like, what? And I was like, oh, I flagged. He was like, oh, good game. You know, I'm not trying to get empathy from a 9-year-old, so it's like, it's fine. I don't know how old he is actually, but he's very, very young. So, I mean, good game to him. Even though he went down the exchange, he like had a lot of counterplay, and I just like could not find a way to go forward. Basically, I felt like I was trapped, even though I had the exchange. So, good stuff to him. I do wish I managed to win this game. Actually, I'll note here around here, I think he offered me a draw. I should have taken it in hindsight, but I thought my position was still good because I'm still up the exchange, and I thought I could like grind it out. Clearly, I did not. Clearly, I did not grind the game out. So maybe I should have taken the draw and just been like, yeah, I can't seem to equalize here or whatever. But I definitely messed up somewhere, and it wasn't so much that. It wasn't that I was losing or that he was winning or whatever. It was just like I just messed it up real bad at the end of it. So shit happens. Let's go to round 2, game number 2, I should say. Let me bring this all the way back before I move over. Game number 2, I am playing against Michael Chen. I think he's a teenager from what I can tell. I don't actually know how old he is. I didn't ask. I don't really care either, to be honest. Before the game, though, he sat down and he asked me, I was like, oh, what school do you go to? And I'm like, I don't go to school. I'm old. I'm old is literally what I said. He's like, oh, how old are you? I'm like, 29. And he's like, oh. Like, he had that, like, oh, shit, okay, kind of face. And I was like, yeah, it's fine. It's like, yeah, I know I look young, but no, I'm 29. So, you know, I hope he doesn't feel embarrassed about asking. I will say, like, I don't care at all if he asks how old I am. Like, it's not a big deal. It doesn't matter after you turn. In my opinion, it doesn't matter how old you are after you turn 21, because there's no like benchmark. Like maybe when you turn 30, but even then, it's whatever. All right. In this game, I have the white pieces, so e4. Now here he plays d6, and I'm expecting a Peart's kind of setup, but after d4 he plays knight f6 right away, which I think is still normal. I play knight c3, and here I'm really expecting g6, bishop g7 to go into like the usual Peart's kind of position or like setup, but he plays knight bd7. And I'm like, okay, maybe you're just delaying g6, bishop g7 to see what my response is before you actually commit to it. I played bishop d3. I could have played something like bishop d3. I could have played knight f3 as well, but I didn't want to play knight f3 because I wanted him to play g6, bishop g7, and I was like waiting for him to do that before I committed my pieces. Admittedly, I probably could still play bishop e2 to wait, but I was just like, you know what, let's just figure out what you want to do. I'm playing bishop e3. The whole idea is After something like bishop, let me just make a random move first. The whole idea is that I want you to castle kingside. I want you to play g6, bishop, g7, and then I want to trade off the light squared bishop. Well, you wouldn't necessarily take me, so maybe you would play like e5, take, and then I'm just gonna like push my pawns and try to develop and really just go after your king here. And I'm gonna castle queenside. So that's what I was kind of expecting, but he broke with e5 immediately. So I was like, all right, you know what? Let me take, and let's just play a normal ass position. I'll start with bishop d3. I should have probably played bishop c4 because it's more active, and this pawn is adequately defended. So yeah, minor mistake, or inaccuracy, or whatever the term is. Bishop e7, knight f3. c6 is a nice move by him because it stops my knight from coming to d5. Castle queen c7 first. I didn't really know what he wanted with queen c7. If he wanted to attack the b pawn, he would have played queen b6. So I was just like, are you overprotecting the e5 pawn maybe? Maybe, I don't know, like whatever. So I continued with queen d2 just to connect my rooks. I wanted to play rook a d1, rook fe1, and just like, I'll have a good position, no complaints. His position is also fine. I wouldn't say anyone clearly has an advantage or anything, so he played knight g4. I figured he wanted to trade my dark square bishop off for the knight, but I didn't want to give him the bishop pair, so I played bishop g5 to look for an equal exchange, or an identical exchange. Bishop for bishop, right? But he went back, to my surprise. He didn't want to trade his bishop, which I thought was weird. But I was like, okay, fine. Rook a d1, castles, rook fe1, knight c5. Again, trying to trade off the bishop here. If I played bishop c4, this one hit my bishop. So that would have been nice. It also would have stopped bishop d6, bishop e6, sorry. And at this point, I was like, well, if I play this, you have b5, and then I can go back to e2, but that's really passive, and then you also get b4. And now all of my pieces are getting into disarray. I could play bishop e2 immediately, but like that also just feels way too passive. And then if bishop c4, b5, bishop b3, he can just take anyway, and he gets what he wanted. So I was like, man, I don't like any of that. I'm going to play queen e2 so that if you do want my bishop, I can take back with the rook. And that's what happened. He continues with h6, kicking my bishop away. I don't want to trade it for the knight and give him 2 bishops for 2 knights. So bishop h4. He plays bishop e6, which, again, if I had played bishop c4, this wouldn't be happening. And then I just like kind of blindly played rook d1, completely missing the fact that bishop c4 is a pin / double attack kind of thing. I'm like, wow, I really missed that. That is pretty lame. It's pretty lame. So yeah, I was just like, well, all right. Here I was like, okay, stop. Let's figure this out. Let's not just like blindly make moves. My first instinct here was, I'm losing material. Can I get some kind of counterattack going? So I looked at rook d7, bishop takes, rook takes, but then I was like, wait, you can take my rook. I stopped calculating here, thinking, okay, I'm down in exchange. It's like, it's still not much better for me. In fact, I think it's worse because I've traded off more material to get to this position. Even though I have, which I didn't see when I was calculating, even though I have rook e7, he has bishop f6. And it's like, now I kind of have to take here. And I'm still down in exchange with even less pieces and a worse pawn structure. So I was like, okay, rook d7 doesn't work. Is there any other move that I can play here? I was looking. My rook really can't go anywhere else useful. So I was like, all right, I'm going down in exchange. So what am I actually exchanging here, right? Like, what is the actual exchange? This is what I'm thinking in the game. Like, I'm losing a rook. He's getting a bishop. Or no, I'm losing a rook. He's losing a bishop. Right, so what is his bishop good for? Light squares, diagonals, Yeah, light squares and diagonals. The light squared bishop, that's what it does, of course. What is my rook good for? Open files, right? So like, okay, so after, well, I played bishop g3. I already showed you, so whatever. So I was like, okay. So if he's giving away his light squared bishop, I can attack on the light squares. So how can I attack on the light squares? Or use the light squares to my benefit because you don't have a light squared bishop? And I looked at the board, I'm like, well, this f5 square looks really nice. How can I use it? Well, if I can get my knight to h4 and then to f5, then that might look pretty good. He might be able to play g3 afterward, or sorry, g6 afterwards, but then this pawn becomes weak, and I was like, okay, maybe there's some play there. And that was like the only idea I had in my head after constant like thinking some more. So if we go back to before I actually made my move, I was like, okay, so I want to bring my knight to h4, bring my knight to f5 afterwards. I need to move my bishop first, so let me play bishop g3. I'm fully ready to give up the rook because, I mean, I don't have anything better. And then after he takes, I just like double check. Do I want to take with the queen? No, because of rook d8, either rook to d8. Do I want to take with the pawn? Not really. The pawn's backwards, and he can go like here, 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 or like here, 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 and attack the pawn. So I was like, I think rook takes is better, and I'll figure it out from there. So rook takes. Something I didn't totally realize in the game was that his e pawn is hanging, right? So I can take right now. So that's why he played bishop d6. I'm continuing with my plan, knight h4. He plays rook a d8. Kind of logical move. I don't know what he was thinking exactly, but if I were him, I'd be looking at an idea like queen b8, bishop c7, opening up the file while still protecting the pawn. You can basically force a trade or double up the rooks and then infiltrate on the d file. So I imagine that's what he was trying to do. I played rook f3. So really, in this position was like, again, a big thing. Like, what is my plan in this position? I don't want to play knight f5 anymore. Like, I totally could, but I realized it wasn't actually as good as I thought it was, because knight f5, g6, take here would check, king g7, knight g4 is forced, and now he can trade. And I don't really see where my advantage is with the light squares. Like, I'm not feeling it, Mr. Krabs. Maybe I still have something with like bishop h4, rook f3, check here, something maybe, but I don't know. I didn't really think that far ahead. So after rook f3, my idea was, okay, well, I can still try to go for this. But I also realized that you can't play g3 anymore because now your your knight hangs. So I was like, okay, rook f3, sure. Yeah, so he played b5, and he totally missed what my idea was in this position. Which, if you want to try to figure out what my idea was in this position, feel free to pause. But my idea was sacrificing on f6. And like, kind of a crazy move because I'm already down material and I'm sacrificing again. But I was like, nah, we in there. And the funny thing about this move, I was waiting for the TD to like walk by and have an eye on the position. So I was also calculating and trying to figure out all the lines in this position, but he got to a point where he came into the room again, I think, and he looked at my board, and when I realized he was looking at my board, I was like, all right, it's time. Rook f6. I played rook f6, I wrote it down, and I kind of sat back a little bit, and I was like, all right, let's see what's going to happen. And in the corner of my eye, I can see him like go like this, like thinking about the movie. He's like, and I'm sure he was just like, wow, he's sacrificing. All right. I mean, I'm sure he was like calculating as well and all that crap, but whatever. So I was just like, I need to show off to, feel good about myself. My opponent played g takes f6. I looked at this briefly with the computer, not too heavily, and it actually doesn't recommend this at all. He recommends bishop e7, which is interesting. But he take was g takes f6, and here I played queen h5. So funnily enough, I actually messed up. I actually should have played knight f5, right? Yeah, it's mate in 4. Knight f4 is mate in 5. But I don't remember why I played it this way. I think I miscalculated this line here. Because I thought he was escaping for some reason here after knight f5. So I played queen h5 first, and now this is actually dead equal. So yeah, that was great. So the whole idea is that I'm trying to play knight f5, queen h5, and then I'll have a mating idea with queen h6, queen g7. And after I played this move instantly without much more consideration. And as I was sitting there waiting for him to make a move, because he looked terribly distressed after this, I have to say, he looked like frozen. And if you look at the position, like, these two pieces are locked out of the kingside defense because of these two pawns, right? And his rooks can't really help either because the king's in the way. And, like, you can't really move the king and get the rook and then move the king back. So I was like, this position looks somewhat promising for me. The problem is that I needed to play knight f5, right? And the reason I needed to play knight f5 is because with queen h5, black actually has a defense. And the defense, which I calculated while I was waiting for my opponent to move, I was like, shit, he might find it, right? And I mean, it's not about he might find it. It's this is the wrong move because he has the defense. Whether or not he finds it is a different story, but queen h5 objectively is the wrong move because knight f5 wins the game with mate, which I only realized after the game, of course. But so yeah, like I was saying, queen h5 is a mistake because black has a defensive resource, f5. And when I realized he had f5, I was like, shit, I'm not actually winning anymore. Like, I don't actually have an attack anymore. And I was like, fuck, that's bad. And the reason is that after, let's say, knight takes, black has f6. Now his queen suddenly can start defending everything. If I take the pawn, he can defend with queen h7, right? And I don't have any more checks. If after f6 I play queen g6 check, he can play king h8. He can play king h8. Right, king h8, and now I don't have mate on g7 because obviously the queen covers it. So when I saw this, I was like, oh god, I'm losing. Like, I'm losing. Yeah, I would say I'm losing because I'm down material still. I was like, shit, that's bad. That sucks. Oh god, that's not good. Granted, I still have like my bishop to maybe like poke at this pawn and try to give a check or something, but like this is not what I wanted, right? I thought it was just like a winning attack, and it was if I had knight f5 first. Unfortunate. So queen h5, but then he plays king h7, so he doesn't see the defense, and I'm like, okay, let's go, knight f5, and here he was in the think tank for an inordinate amount of time. Yeah, so like, I mean, he's getting mated. It's mate in 2. Or mate in 3, technically. Well, he has to make a move, and then it's mate in 2. So let me say it that way. This transposes into the mate in 4 line that was available if I had not played queen h5. And in this position, after thinking for like 7, maybe like 5 minutes, he offered me a draw. And he was like, draw? I'm like, draw? He's like, yeah, you're down material. I'm like, no, I'm going to decline. And then he sat back and he like looked dejected again. And he's like trying to figure out a defense. And after a while, he gave up and he just played rook h8. And I mean, it's mate here. So boom, bam, blap. Yeah. He was visibly upset because he had his like head in his shirt. He was like kind of like doing this kind of thing, like ugh. And I mean, I feel for the guy. Like, you're up in material and then suddenly you just lost to a sacrifice, and you're like, man, what the fuck? What happened? I was winning, and I get it. But the reality of life is, sometimes you just gotta handle tough defeats like that. And I feel for the kid. It's not like I'm saying like screw him or anything. I'm just like that's just what it is. I lose games like that too, where I was like the last round I was winning and then I lost. So shit happens, man. Shit happens. But this was a cool sacrifice, which didn't even technically work with the way I did it after rook f6. But after b5, so black was winning here. Yeah, it's minus 2.5, and after b5, it's winning for white after this sacrifice. Only move. So this is probably like my proudest move of the game. And of course, I just misplayed queen h5. I should have played knight f5. And the reason knight f5 works is that you no longer can push the f5 pawn to try to make room for your queen to come in. And even after this, yeah, this is mate. Right? I'm not crazy. Rook f8. Yeah, it's still mate in 2. Yeah. All right. So that was that. I missed a cleaner win, but such is life. Moving on to the third round, I have the white pieces again. And I'm playing Benjamin Sheng. He's rated 1229, sorry. I overheard him when he was talking to someone else on the first round about how old he was. And I asked him again, it's like, oh, how old are you, by the way? He's like, oh, I'm this old. I was like, oh, shit, well, I'm 29. So you're like, oh, man, we're the adults in the room, right? And I was like, yeah, I don't want to take care of these kids, though. And he's like, well, that's not our job, so whatever. I'm like, true. So small little funny interaction before the game. But I have the white pieces, so, once we sat down, we were able to begin, so we began. E4, and then he played knight f6. I'm like, oh, shit, an Alekhine. I have not seen this in a long time, not even in my online games. I'm like, all right, so I have a weapon for this, which I'm surprised I still remember, but whatever. E5, attacking the knight, obviously. Knight d5, c4, attacking the knight again. Knight b6, d4, solidifying my center. d6, trying to chip away. f4. This is known as the 4 pawns attack in the Alekhine defense. And the idea is that if he takes here, I take back with the f pawn, and I have still a very nice center. I'm going to be able to castle and use the open f file and generate some kind of active play. So that's the idea. He plays g6, which didn't feel right, because even after something like, let me just make a random move. Even after something like this, like black's bishop still isn't doing anything. Like, it's stuck behind the 2 pawns. So I was like, if that's your plan, that's fine, but doesn't seem right. I play knight f3, bishop g7, bishop e2, just normal development, castle, castle, bishop g4. I have to be aware of a small thing here, which is if black takes, I take, and afterwards my c pawn is hanging. So let's say I don't realize that. He can do this, 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 and I lose a pawn. So I played b3 to defend the pawn so that if he takes here, I can take back and it's fine. He plays knight c6. I was considering d5 here, but after something like, I don't know, knight b8 or whatever, I felt like my pawn here is a little loose. So, for example, here. And it's like, I don't want to move my pawn because my rook is pinned. Or my pawn is pinned to the rook, I guess you would say. So I discarded d5, And I just played bishop e3 to just defend everything. I have more space. My development is slightly better than his just by piece activity. Everything should be okay. E6, knight c3, a6. It looks like he's just waiting here. He like kind of has a weird hippo setup going on, except in the hippo, the light squared bishop is supposed to be here. I played h3 just to force the trade bishop for knight. Kind of thinking, okay, like, how do I actually make progress in this position? I wasn't totally sure. My opponent played h6 to wait, so I was like, all right, what's the move here? I started with queen d2. I remembered, I don't remember where I read this or heard this, but it's like, before you go crazy and start attacking, if you have the time, just improve your position to the maximum and then go for it, because now all of your pieces are going to be involved right when you attack. So I was like, yeah, let me just improve my position and just move my rooks into the open files, or not open files, the central files, and I'll be good. Here he played f5, and I was like, ooh, f5. That's an interesting move. Apparently what I was supposed to do is play en passant. Rook takes to defend f6 or g6. And I don't remember exactly what the follow-up was. I think it was something like here. Or maybe it was d5. But basically the idea is to attack these pawns. But I didn't do that. I just played rook fd1. So, side tangent. GM Maxime Delugi was there, and he was giving away, not giving away, but he was available for game analysis. Like, to analyze one of the games. And after this game, me and my opponent went over there and were like, hey, can we get our game like looked at briefly? And we got to this point in the game, and he's like, so he assumed rook ad1. He assumes rook ad1, but I was like, oh no, I played rook fd1. He's like, why not rook ad1? I was like, oh, I wanted to defend my a pawn. And I'm like, and he was like, but your a pawn's defended by your knight and your queen. And I was like, oh, wow, what's wrong with me? I blame it on it being round 3, and I was just not like really looking at stuff. I was just probably just like, I probably didn't realize I was mentally burned, like drained from the first 2 games. So yeah, I just like totally overlooked that my knight and queen defend the a2 pawn. And I'm just like, wow, that's crazy. I missed that. But anyway, rook b8, d5. I played d5 here because I was like, all right, I'm ready to open the center, and I probably have some kind of play after like this and like something here. I don't know. But after d5, he took with the e pawn, and I probably should have taken back with the c pawn to put tempo on the knight. I took back with the knight. I don't know why. Don't ask. I don't know why I made these moves. Like, as I look back at them, I'm like, why did I do that? Like, what's... But anyway, he plays d takes e5, so he's actually winning a pawn on e5, which I totally overlooked. I didn't even realize until after the fact. So fe5, king h7 I thought was kind of interesting. Not really sure what that was about. I played rook ac1, just getting out of this diagonal. I'm losing the pawn anyway, so it's kind of like whatever. But I continued with queen f2 after he took the pawn on e5. Traded off bishop for knight. And then he took my knight on the d5 square, and I took back with the rook just to get tempo on the queen. The other idea is I'm going to play rook cd1. And I'm like, all right, well, I have both of my rooks on the open file. I can very easily shift my queen over here, and I've got, I just have a nice position, even though I'm down a pawn. So queen e8, rook cd1, rook f7, defending infiltration, bishop f4, trying to pressure this pawn eventually. b5, just trying to, I guess he was just trying to like strike against these pawns, I guess. I'm not really sure. But take. And here, and for the next like 7 or 8 and 9 moves or whatever, let's just say the next 9 moves I should have played a4 because, and again, this is from GM Delugi's analysis. He's like, if black plays b4 and you're lost is white. I'm like, oh shit, really? And I looked at it, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense now. Like if I play a random move like this, right? Black plays b4. Now my a pawn is backwards, and it's like a deep freeze, as Neroditsky calls it. And again, black can, or let me make a random move for white. Black has ideals like rook a8. Maybe even, actually, I think even better is bishop c3. And I mean, this just looks bad, right? Like, let's just say here, maybe. I mean, my queen's hanging, but you know, that's the idea. Like, it was gonna get bad because of b4. I didn't realize how bad my position would be after b4. I just continue with queen d3, just like, oh, Alkine's gun, you know, like, whatever. Rook e7. I figured he was going down here, but I didn't really care all too much, so I just played rook d7. He went down, take king h2. And I was like, okay, well, I still have pressure on the c7 pawn, so I think I'm still okay. Rook e8. Queen d4. I just wanted to be cheeky here, and you know, try to threaten mate. But he found a good defensive resource with rook e7. I probably could have taken this pawn right away, to be honest. Although, yeah, I probably could have taken the pawn right away and just been fine. But yeah, so queen d4. Again, I'm just trying to be cheeky at this point. I think this should have been the sign where I was like, where I should have realized I'm just tired and I'm like not really thinking about moves too deeply. Yeah, so rook e7. I was just like, all right, whatever, I'm just gonna trade. And then I played queen a7. So my ideal is to put more pressure on this pawn, and I just like totally thought, oh yeah, bishop e5, whatever, I'll just take. But this isn't actually all that much better, because again, b4 is still coming. It hasn't been 9 moves yet, so b4 is always on the cards this entire time. I should have played a4. So anyway, king g1, h5. And now I'm like, oh, I should play a4 and make a pass pawn. So I finally do. I finally made the pass pawn that I should have made like 10 moves ago. Yeah, so a4, b takes, king h6. I had a funny idea where I could try to play h4, and then somehow, let's just say, random moves. Like, I wanted to do something stupid like this, and if the queen moves, I go here and it's mate. But that obviously doesn't work because you can just play g5. And even after something like this, I don't like this position, actually. I'm not a big fan of this, so yeah, whatever. h4 probably didn't actually work. I just pushed my pawn a5. He played c5, a6, h4. And here I was like, well, I have to pass a pawn, so I'm just going to threaten to promote it. There's no checkmate because it's just the queen, right? I can't get back rank checkmated in this position, so I was like, whatever. So I played queen b7, and then he offered me a draw before he made his move. And I looked at the position, and I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll take the draw. And I mean, the real reason I took the draw is because it's basically a force to draw. Obviously, if black tries to continue playing for a win, I'm going to promote because you can't stop my pawn. Right, so something like this. Right, and I mean, it's over. Well, is it over? I mean, I wouldn't want to play this position. That's funny. But anyway, sorry. Anyway, um, yeah, I think he was just scared of promotion, so um, he has a forced perpetual check here. All right, here. So, yeah, he offered to draw here, even though he had perpetual check on the board. And I accepted after looking at it. I'm like, there's no way to stop this, right? And I looked at it and I'm like, no, there's no way to stop it. So I accepted the draw. I'm like, it's going to be a draw anyway. So, yeah, those were the 3 games. Ended up, so I ended up with 1.5 out of 3, which is better than what I've done in the last 2 tournaments here at Chess Max. So I was like, I'll take it. I'm like, I'm kind of happy that I did better, but I'm not happy that I'm not going 2 out of 3. That's where it stands. Yeah, I'll put the rating update in the description of the video once I actually get the update, which God knows when that's actually going to happen. Furthermore, my USCF page hasn't updated with my last Chess Max tournament because I should be at 1111, but USCF page says it's still 1095, so I don't know what the hell's going on there. And yeah, that was how that went. Could have been better, but I did better than I usually do, so I guess it's something. Next tournament is 5-0 Blitz at Brooklyn Game Night on March 1st. I don't know if I'm going to be able to record those, but we'll see. We'll see. But until then, well, I'll see when I put the next video out. I don't know. We'll figure it out.